Paranormal M doesn't fear the shadows. It follows them. We uncover the mysteries the world wants forgotten. Subscribe and dare to remember. Okay, so let me just start from the beginning. Our house is old. Not like charming old, more like it's seen some things old. The first floor was the original house. Before my family ever moved in, it belonged to an elderly couple. The wife actually had her funeral in the living room. People came, paid their respects, and said goodbye. Right there in what is now our TV room. Later, my grandparents bought the place and added a second floor. So the top floor is newer, but the bottom has all that history baked into it. My Grandma June, also passed away in the first floor guest room. So yeah, this house has had more than one goodbye inside its walls. Now, before I was even born, weird stuff was already happening. One night my dad was in the tiny downstairs bathroom, sitting on the toilet, smoking a cigarette out the cracked window. Super glamorous, I know. He said he suddenly heard a very clear, very stern voice right behind him say, "Put it out." Not yelling, just firm, like a scolding. He swears he dropped the cigarette, flicked it out the window, yanked up his pants, and ran out of there. There was no one else around the bathroom. The window looks out over the side yard. No porch, no people. Just that voice. Then there was my Granddad Earl. He was dozing on the couch in the family room one evening when he woke up to the smell and sight of smoke in the air. Thick, hazy, like the whole house was about to go up. He jumped up in a panic, ready to yell for everyone and call the fire department. But the second he stood up and really looked around, it was gone. No smoke, no smell, just normal. Like someone flipped a switch. My grandma had her own story. One afternoon she was in the hallway bathroom, standing at the sink. In the mirror, she saw a little girl standing beside her. Only the girl wasn't actually there when she turned her head. Just in the reflection. Dark hair, pale dress. She said the girl wasn't menacing, just there, watching her. By the time she looked back at the mirror, the girl was gone. So that's the kind of history I was born into. Now for my own encounters. One night I was half asleep in my room upstairs, lying on my side facing away from the door. The house was quiet. Suddenly, my bedroom door slammed shut, like full-on slam. I shot up, heart pounding, and went straight downstairs. At that time, it was just my granddad and my uncle, Uncle Rob, at home. I asked, "Okay, who slammed my door?" And both of them looked genuinely confused. They were like, "We heard your door close, but we thought it was you." I tried to brush it off. I told myself, "You were half asleep. Maybe it just swung shut on its own." So I went back to bed. The next morning, I noticed something I hadn't seen the night before. There was a new hole in my door. Not huge, but very clearly from an impact. I pulled the door all the way open, and that hole lined up perfectly with the sharp corner of my dresser. So whatever force slammed that door shut did it hard enough to punch the wood into my furniture. And no one was up there. Another time, my friends and I were having a sleepover. We were all in my room on the second floor, blankets everywhere, snacks, the whole thing. It was late, and the house had that super quiet, middle-of-the-night feeling. Out of nowhere, we heard this sound outside, like someone dragging heavy chains across the backyard. Not fast, slow. Metal scraping over the ground. We all went silent, just listening. You know when everyone's trying to pretend they're not scared, but nobody moves? That was us. Finally, we peeked out the window, expecting to see something. A neighbor, a prank, anything. No one was out there. No shadows, no movement. Just the backyard. Now, the strangest thing that ever happened involved me and my mom at the same time, but from two totally different angles. Let me tell you my side first. That night, I went to bed earlier than usual. I pulled my door mostly shut, left it just a little cracked, and made sure it was unlocked. I always did that because my granddad liked to peek in sometimes to check on me, or say goodnight if I was still awake. It made me feel safe, knowing someone could come in if they needed to. I remember settling in and thinking it was going to be a normal night. I'm one of those people who almost always wakes up at least once. Bathroom, water, scrolling my phone, something. But that night, I didn't wake up at all. I slept straight through. Now here's what my mom, Elena, says happened downstairs. She was sleeping in the family room on the first floor, right at the bottom of the stairs. It's an open space, so you can hear everything, every step, every door. She says she heard my bedroom door open upstairs. Then she heard what she thought were my footsteps coming down the stairs, creaking in that way our steps always creak. She heard me cross through the downstairs hallway, walk into the living room, and move around for a bit. She assumed I was getting water or a snack or something, so she didn't sit up or turn around. Her back was to the room the whole time. After a while, she heard the footsteps go back toward the stairs, then climb up. My bedroom door opened again, shut again. She figured, okay, she's going back to bed. A few minutes later, she hears my door open a third time. Footsteps down the stairs, this time only halfway. Then they stop, right on the staircase. She calls out my name. Hey, what are you doing? Why are you just standing there? She says that right after she asked, the footsteps slowly turned around on the steps, went back up to the second floor, walked into my room, and the door closed again. She thought I was just being weird or sleepwalking or something. Eventually, she fell back asleep. Now back to me. Like I said, I slept the entire night. No getting up, no bathroom trips, nothing. In the morning, I woke up feeling kind of weirdly rested. I got out of bed, went to open my door, and it didn't budge. It was locked. My door only locks from the inside. There's no way to lock it from the hallway. I just stood there for a second, staring at the doorknob like, how? I clearly remembered leaving it cracked and unlocked, specifically so my granddad could check on me if he wanted. I unlocked it, went downstairs, and my mom immediately asked, "What on earth were you doing last night?" I was confused and told her, I didn't get up at all. I slept the whole night. That's when she told me everything she heard. The door, the footsteps, me supposedly walking around, then standing halfway down the stairs and going back up again. We just kind of sat there looking at each other like, so if that wasn't me, that one still gives me chills. Bonus story. My boyfriend at the time, let's call him Liam, was in my room with me one afternoon. We were just hanging out, talking, nothing spooky. Suddenly, we both heard this loud noise in the room. It sounded like something heavy shifting or dropping. I heard it from his side of the room. He heard it from my side of the room. We both whipped around and immediately accused each other. What did you knock over? What did you do? But nothing had moved. Nothing had fallen. The room was exactly the same. The weirdest part was how genuinely freaked out he looked. He's not the type to spook easily or play along just to scare me. Seeing him unsettled made me believe even more that neither of us made that noise. and whatever did, we couldn't see.
And then there are all the smaller things that have happened over the years.
The kind of stuff you almost get used to in a house like this. Dogs staring into empty corners of the room and growling, or tracking something across the ceiling with their eyes when there's nothing there. Hearing voices from another room when everyone's accounted for. Random knocks, soft footsteps in the hallway when the whole family's sitting together on the couch. It's always just enough to make you pause. Just enough to make you think, we are definitely not alone here. But here's the thing. As creepy as all of this sounds, no one has ever been physically harmed. No scratches, no pushing, no objects thrown at us. I've never actually seen anything with my own eyes. No full-bodied apparitions. No classic horror movie moment. It feels more like the house is still shared. Like the people who loved it before us. The ones who said their goodbyes here. Never completely left. So yeah, that's my haunted house. And for better or worse, it's home. You know, every time I tell this story, I still get that same little chill in my chest. So, I must have been about 8 years old. We were out in the countryside, on this narrow dirt road that led to my Aunt Rosa's house. It was late at night, one of those nights where everything feels too quiet, like the world is holding its breath. My Uncle Javier was leading the horse, and I was sitting in front of my mom, Elena, on the saddle. He'd brought this gray cat in a little cloth bag as a gift for my aunt. I remember feeling really excited about it because I loved animals, and the cat had these bright yellow eyes that stared at everything. It was so dark that night. No streetlights, just the pale moon and the shapes of trees. I was small, so all I could really see were shadows and the outline of the road. My mom was holding the cat at first, kind of pressed against her coat so it wouldn't jump. At some point, she moved the cat into my arms, and I was trying to be gentle. But suddenly, I started hearing these cries. Loud, long wails, like a woman sobbing somewhere far away, but also right next to my ear. It didn't sound like an animal. It sounded human, and the sound just echoed in my head. As soon as I heard it, the cat went crazy. It started scratching my arms, digging its claws in, like it wanted to get away from me. I yelped and complained to my mom that it hurt, and she quickly took the cat back, trying to calm it down. I remember looking up and noticing the sky was cloudy, like the moon kept slipping in and out behind the clouds. We reached a crossroads, and my uncle said we needed to turn left. Right there, near the turn, there was a signpost. In my memory, it was this old, worn blue sign with white letters showing the way to the village. And that's when I saw her. Next to the sign, just off the side of the road, there was a woman standing there. At first, she was just a darker shape among the shadows. But as my eyes adjusted, I could make out more. She was thin, wearing a long dress that went past her ankles. In her right hand, she held something like a walking stick. Or maybe a broom. I'm still not sure. And she had this wide-brimmed hat that covered most of her face. She didn't move. She was just there. And as I stared, Those cries in my ears got louder, like they were coming from her. I remember grabbing my mom's arm and saying, "Mama, look, that woman." My voice was shaking. I kept pointing, desperate for someone else to see what I was seeing. My mom turned her head in the direction I pointed. She squinted into the dark and said, "What woman?" "There's nothing there," I insisted. I pointed again, described the hat, the dress, the stick. My heart was pounding. But my mom, she saw nothing. My uncle said he didn't see anyone either. The horse just kept walking, and as we passed that spot, I twisted my body around to keep looking at the figure. And then, as we moved away, the cries faded, like someone turning down the volume. For years, I told myself it had to be a dream, that maybe I'd fallen asleep on the horse. But I remember the feeling of the saddle, the cat's claws, the cold night air. And the weirdest part is, later on, I asked my mom if she remembered me pointing at a woman by the sign and talking about some crying sounds. And she does remember me doing that. She remembers me getting scared, pointing, insisting there was a woman there. But she still swears she never saw anyone. That wasn't the only strange thing that's happened to me either. One night, much later, I was in my room studying for an exam I had the next morning. I put my phone on the left corner of my bed to charge, right by the wall, and lay down on my back staring at the ceiling and going over everything I had to remember. After a few minutes, I suddenly realized I hadn't set my alarm, so I sat up, reached over to grab my phone, and it wasn't there. The charger cable was hanging down off the side of the bed, stretched tight, like it had been pulled. There was this little gap between the bed and the wall where things sometimes fell, so I thought, great, I must have kicked it off somehow. But I hadn't heard anything fall. No thud, no clatter, nothing. I leaned over the side of the bed, kind of annoyed and kind of confused, and looked down into that narrow space. There was my phone. Not on the floor, not wedged awkwardly, not at a weird angle. It was resting perfectly on this tiny strip of baseboard, still plugged in, still charging, like someone had carefully set it there. No scratches, no cracks. And I didn't even have a case on it at the time. Any normal fall, and it should have hit the ground, or at least bounced around. I remember just staring at it for a moment, feeling this tightness in my chest. It didn't make sense. I picked it up quickly, checked the screen, the edges, everything. Perfect condition. And that feeling of something being just a little off, like reality had skipped a beat, stayed with me for the rest of the night. Another time, there was this thing with my stepfather, Tomas. He wanted to watch a football match on the TV in my room because the living room TV was busy. I was in the living room flipping through channels, trying to find the right one for him. From down the hallway, I heard him call out, kind of joking, "I'm going in now." And I heard the sound of him dragging this old red armchair we had. The chair always made this scraping, bumping noise when it hit the doorframe. I heard exactly that, a sort of thud and scrape as he went into my room with it. From where I was, I could see the hallway and my bedroom door. I saw him pass by with the chair and disappear into my room. It was such a normal, everyday moment that I didn't think twice about it. Once I finally found the channel, I got up and walked to my room to tell him. I stepped through the doorway, already talking, something like, "Hey, I found the match. It's on channel." And then I just stopped. The room was empty. The TV was off. The red armchair wasn't there. No one was in my room. I remember my brain trying to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. I literally froze for a couple of seconds. I had just heard him. I had just seen him walk in. And then, not even 10 seconds later, I heard his footsteps coming down the hallway behind me. Tomas appeared, dragging the same red armchair, and said, in the same playful tone, "I'm going in now," then bumped the chair against the doorframe in exactly the same way I'd heard before. This time, I watched him physically enter the room. It felt like I'd seen it twice, first like a preview, and then for real. I didn't tell him right away what happened. I just stood there, watching him set up, feeling like I was slightly out of sync with time. Later, when I did tell him, he laughed and said I must have been tired or distracted. Maybe he's right. Maybe there's an explanation for all of this. But here's the thing. Those moments, all of them. The woman by the roadside. The cries no one else heard. The phone neatly balanced where it shouldn't have been. My stepfather entering my room twice. They're burned into my memory in a way that regular days aren't. Sometimes I tell myself it was just my imagination, or coincidences, or my brain filling in gaps. And other times, I wonder. I wonder if, in those quiet, in-between moments, out on a dark road, in the space between a bed and a wall, or in the doorway of a room, something slips through that we're not supposed to notice. And every now and then, for just a second, we do. So, for a bit of context, I live in this really old converted barn out in the countryside. Like, properly old. The kind of place where you just know animals lived and died here for decades before anyone thought, yeah, let's put a family in this. I've always kind of joked that the place has history. But a couple of things have happened that made me stop joking so much. The first thing was the light. We have this ceiling light in the hallway that hasn't worked for, I don't know, around 7 years? Maybe more. We never bothered to fix it because we just used lamps, and honestly, it became one of those broken but invisible things in the house. No one touches it. The switch is always off. Then one night, I'm walking past and I noticed this faint flicker. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, like a car going by. But the road is too far away for that. I look up and it's the dead light, just flickering on and off, really slowly. Like someone was playing with a dimmer that doesn't exist. It only did it at night, and it would last anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes. Not every night, but often enough that we started noticing a pattern. It did this for maybe 3 weeks, and then it just stopped. We never changed the bulb, never touched the wiring. It just decided to be alive for a while and then go back to being dead again. I kept telling myself there had to be some electrical reason. Old house, weird wiring, end of story. Except it wasn't the end. A couple months later, I was sitting on my bed scrolling on my phone. My room was pretty quiet, nothing dramatic going on. I had the small roll of bright yellow masking tape lying flat on my desk, laying on its side so it couldn't just roll away. Out of the corner of my eye, I see movement. The tape doesn't just tilt or wobble, it slides. Clean across part of the desk and drops to the floor. Not a huge distance, but enough that my brain went, nope. Physics did not sign off on that. I kind of froze. By the time I fully turned to look, it was already on the floor, nowhere near where it had been. There was no breeze, no window open, no one else in the room. I tried to shrug it off, but it definitely stuck with me. Then there was the knee thing. One night, I'm lying in bed in the dark, half asleep, half in that weird in-between stage. I had one leg slightly bent, resting on top of the blanket. Out of nowhere, I feel this pressure on my knee. Not like a cramp, not like a muscle twitch. It felt exactly like a hand. Fingers pressing in, squeezing my knee. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough that I knew it wasn't just in my head. I absolutely lost it. I screamed, sat straight up, and yanked my leg in like something was about to grab the rest of me. A second later, the feeling was gone. No lingering pain, no pins and needles, nothing. Just my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. I tried to tell myself it was just a muscle spasm or my brain misfiring as I was falling asleep. But the shape of it, the way it felt like an actual hand, that's what really unsettled me. Now, my dad, well, his name's Daniel, but everyone calls him Dan, has his own story about this house. Before the place was properly fixed up, he used to sleep here alone sometimes while doing renovations. One night, he was in what's now my room, sleeping in almost complete darkness. No TV, no street lights, just that heavy, quiet kind of dark you get in the countryside. He said he woke up to the slow creaking on the stairs. At first, he thought it was the house settling, like old wood shifting. But then it kept going. Step, pause, step, pause.
He realized it was getting closer.
Up the stairs, along the landing, heading straight towards the bedroom door. He was lying there, absolutely still, just listening. The creaks stopped right outside his room. Like whatever it was had reached the doorway. He finally reached over and flicked on the lamp beside the bed. The second the light came on, silence. Nothing. No more creaks. He told me he got up, opened the door, checked the landing, checked the stairway, the front door, everything. There was no one there. After that, he started sleeping with some kind of light on. Even now, he'll leave the hallway lamp on at night. He laughs it off when we tease him, but he never sleeps in total darkness anymore. Then there's the shoe thing, which sounds small, but it really freaked me out because I wasn't alone when it happened. I was in the living room with my younger sister, Mia. We were just talking, kind of half paying attention to a show in the background. My sneakers were on the floor in front of the sofa, side by side. They were completely still. No one was near them. Out of the corner of my eye, I see one of them shift. And not like it slid because the floor is uneven. It moved sharply. Just a little, maybe an inch or so to the left. I blinked and turned my head properly. And at the same time, Mia goes, "Did you see that?" We both stared at the shoe. It was such a tiny movement. But the fact that both of us saw it threw me. If it had just been me, I would have told myself I imagined it, that my brain filled in a gap in my peripheral vision. But we both saw it, at the same time, and nothing else in the room was moving. Look, I know a lot of things in an old house can be explained. Creaky stairs, bad wiring, weird drafts, muscle spasms, even our brains playing tricks on us when we're tired or already a bit spooked. But when I put all of it together, the dead light flickering for weeks and then stopping, the roll of tape sliding off a flat surface, the feeling of a hand on my knee, my dad's footsteps on the stairs that stopped the instant he turned the light on, and that little sideways slide of my shoe that both me and Mia saw. I don't know. Maybe every single one of those things has a logical explanation. Maybe it's all just coincidence and timing and nerves. But living here, actually being in this house, day in and day out, It sometimes feels like the barn doesn't want to be completely empty. Like something that used to be here never really left. So I'm doing this bit of digging for a close friend of mine, Liam, and I want to tell you his story the way he told it to me. I know how it sounds, but he's not the type to make things up. And even after all these years, his hands still shake when he talks about it. This all started back in late spring of 2012. Liam was staying at his nan's place in the Bar Hill area, just outside Peterborough. You know those quiet estates where every sound carries and you can smell people's dinners from halfway down the street? That sort of place. It was one of those bright, clear afternoons. Cool enough for a jacket, but the sun was doing its best. He decided to go for a walk in a spot everyone local just calls the Brambles. It's a tangle of scrub and trees, with little paths cut through by years of kids messing about and dog walkers taking shortcuts. Nothing special. He'd been there dozens of times. He told me that, at first, everything was completely normal. Birds, distant traffic, the occasional shout from kids somewhere behind him. And then, as he stepped off the main path, just a few meters, he said, everything cut out. And I mean everything. No wind in the branches, no birds, no distant rumble of cars. Just this hard, dense silence that felt like it had weight. He said it felt like he'd just walked into a room where someone had been arguing, and they all went quiet the second he opened the door. That's when he saw it. About 15, maybe 20 feet ahead, between two scruffy-looking bushes, something stepped into view. He described it as a grayish figure, but not gray like clothing. Gray skin. The kind of color you see in the underside of an animal, or something that hasn't seen the sun in a very long time. There was a light covering of fur over it, thin and patchy, more like wiry hair than a proper coat. It was hunched, the spine curved, shoulders high, and it moved on all fours. Not like a dog, he said. More like something that could stand upright if it wanted to, but preferred not to. Its eyes were the worst part. They were a deep, burning orange, with dark red pupils that didn't look quite round. He said they reminded him of embers in a fire, when you poke them and they flare up for a second. And even from that distance, he felt them lock onto him. He heard this low sound coming from it, somewhere between a growl and a wet, grisling sort of throat noise. It wasn't loud, but it went straight through him in a way that normal sounds don't. Every nerve in his body told him he shouldn't be there. He said the feeling was very clear. You're not welcome here. Get out. The whole thing lasted maybe 4 or 5 seconds. That's all. But he swears it felt stretched, like time had been pulled thin, long enough for every detail to burn itself into his memory. And during those few seconds, the air around him turned bitterly cold. Not just a gust of wind, not a chill. He said it felt like stepping into a walk-in freezer. His breath didn't fog or anything. It was just that sharp, bone-deep cold that makes your skin tighten. Then he blinked, and it was gone. No sound of it moving off. No rustling in the bushes. 1 second it was there, locked eyes with him. The next second he was just staring at empty trees and scrub. And as soon as it vanished, all the background noise snapped back. Wind, birds, distant cars. Like someone hit unmute on the world. That's when the fear properly hit him. He turned and just ran. Full-on, blind panic. He told me he didn't even look back once. He sprinted all the way to his nan's house, slammed the door and locked every window and door he could find. Then he just sat on the floor with his back against the hallway door, heart hammering, listening for anything. He noticed a few things in the aftermath when he calmed down enough to think. There were no strange lights. It didn't get darker, like a storm rolling in. There were no odd smells. It was just the silence, the cold, and that thing. He's never seen it again, not with his own eyes. At first, he tried to rationalize it. He remembered hearing that the zoo over near Shepreth had an escaped wolf in the early 2000s and wondered if his mind had just cooked something up from that old story. But the more he tried to line it up in his head, the less it made sense. He kept coming back to the proportions. Too tall, too long in the limbs, shoulders too high, and those eyes, not right for any normal animal. The closest thing he could compare it to, he said, was the werewolf form of Professor Lupin from the Harry Potter films. But even that was only a rough approximation. It was like someone had taken that idea and made it real in a way that didn't belong in our world. Over time, we started throwing ideas around. The one that kept coming up was skinwalker, or something like it. Some kind of entity, not just an animal that wandered too far from home. Now that would be unsettling enough on its own, but that wasn't the end of it. A little while later, maybe a few weeks, he had a second encounter, not far from his nan's house. There's a nature reserve about a 10-minute walk away, a wide field with a single, lonely-looking tree in the middle. If you're from the area, you probably know the one I mean. It was early evening this time, sky turning that pale gold you get just before sunset. Liam went out walking again, because what else are you going to do? Stay inside forever? He cut across the field, heading vaguely towards that lone tree, not really thinking about anything in particular. Then he heard it. A slow, rhythmic creaking. At first he thought it was just the branches moving in the wind, except there was barely any breeze. But the sound kept coming. Creak, creak, creak. Steady, like a pendulum. He looked up at the tree. Hanging from one of the thicker branches was the dark outline of a woman, gently swinging back and forth. Not sharply, not violently, just swaying, like the wind was pushing her in slow motion. He couldn't make out her features clearly. It was more of a silhouette, but he could see the line of the arms, the fall of the dress or long coat, the slack curve of the body as it swung. The rope, if that's what it was just a darker streak against the sky. He told me he couldn't look away. He tried. He said his eyes actually hurt from staring, but it was like they were locked in place. He described it as feeling pinned, like something in that scene was holding him there, insisting that he watch. He said it wasn't just fear. There was this heavy sadness pressing down on him, like walking into a room where someone's been crying for hours. A sort of grief he couldn't explain. Then his body did what his mind couldn't. He blinked. Just a normal, involuntary blink. And when his eyelids lifted again, the tree was empty. No woman, no rope, no sound. The creaking had stopped. The field was still. And the tree just stood there, the way it always does. He checked the branches, walked closer than he really wanted to, and there was nothing. No marks, no disturbed ground, no sign that anyone had ever been there. That second encounter rattled him almost more than the first, because it felt connected somehow. Same general area, same strange break in what reality should look like. He showed me photos of the place later. The field, the lone tree, the path through the brambles. On their own, they look totally ordinary. You'd never guess anything had happened there. And that's why I'm telling you all this. We both keep coming back to the same question. Surely he can't be the only one. Bar Hill isn't huge, but it isn't tiny either. People walk their dogs. Kids hang out there. Couples cut across those fields. If Liam has had these two encounters, it's hard to believe no one else has seen or felt something. He's tried going through the usual channels. I've contacted local authorities, sent messages, made calls. No one responds. No one wants to talk about it, or they genuinely don't know anything. Either way, we're left with silence. So here I am, sharing his story with you, as honestly as I can. If you've ever been in that area, in the brambles, near that lonely tree in the nature reserve by Bar Hill, and you felt the air turn suddenly cold, or the world go unnaturally quiet, or you've just had that gut-deep feeling that you were being watched or warned off, you're not alone. Liam's not crazy. He's not attention-seeking. He's just someone who saw something he can't explain twice and has been carrying it around ever since. And maybe, just maybe, someone listening to this has a piece of the puzzle we've been missing. So, before I dive into this, I always have to start with a disclaimer. There's no proof of what I'm about to tell you. No photos, no audio, no physical evidence. Just me, and one once dear friend who heard every single thing I did. This was in the mid-1970s, long before everyone carried cameras in their pockets. I didn't own a camera, or a tape recorder, or anything like that. It actually wasn't until around 2005 that I started seriously researching the paranormal. Back then, I was just a kid with a job and a love for the outdoors. One of my first real jobs was in retail, at a sporting goods store. Early 70s. I worked my way into managing the camping department over the summers. And the attitude toward customers back then was different. We weren't just clerks ringing things through. We were salespeople who actually knew the gear. We listened, asked questions, matched people to the right tent or backpack. We took a kind of pride in it. That's how I met this guy. I'll call him Mark. He came in looking for a tent one slow afternoon. I walked him through materials, pole types, weather ratings, how to set it up, the whole thing. He was impressed that some skinny college kid actually knew what he was talking about. We got talking, first about camping, then about trips, then about life in general. And by the end of that shift, we weren't just salesman and customer anymore. We were friends. During the summers, when classes were out, Mark worked as a canoe guide up in Algonquin Park in northern Ontario. He led long canoe trips, sometimes 2-3 weeks at a time. Canoeing, portaging, backcountry camping in places you absolutely could not drive to. He was in demand because he knew what he was doing. People trusted him with their safety for weeks in the middle of nowhere. Over the next couple of years, I started tagging along on some of his shorter trips. We'd spend long weekends exploring quiet corners of Algonquin. He taught me how to hang food properly so black bears couldn't get to it, how to read the wind on the lakes, how to listen to the forest and know when something wasn't normal. I admired him, not just for his skills, but for how calm he was. Nothing rattled him. Around him, I always felt safe. And of course, me being young and eager, I kept saying, "We've got to do a real trip, not just 3 days. I want to know what it's like to really push it." 2 weeks. Deep in, I wanted the full, stripped-down, hard mode experience. Eventually, that chance came. We planned a longer trip, about 10 days. We paddled and portaged for several days straight, deeper and deeper into the park. By Mark's estimate, we were at least 25 miles from where we'd first put the canoe in. No roads, no cabins, no people. Just lakes and forest. One late afternoon, I said to him, "Let's find somewhere really remote tonight. Somewhere that feels different." And he nodded, like, "Okay, you asked for it." We ended up spotting this small island in the middle of a quiet lake. Just one marked campsite on it. No other sites nearby. No cottages. Nothing. It was the kind of place where, when you stop paddling, the silence presses in on you. We pulled up, unloaded the canoe, and got to work. We pitched the tent in the middle of the island, set up camp, and made dinner over an open fire. The sky went from gold to deep blue, and then to that velvety dark you get so far from the city. I remember thinking we'd only seen one other canoe the entire day. It really felt like we were cut off from the world. Like stepping back 100 years. Easy. We'd just finished eating. We were sitting by the fire, leaning back on our packs, talking lazily about nothing in particular. That's when we heard it.
At first, it sounded like something big moving through the trees.
And that's not unusual up there. Branches snapping, underbrush being pushed aside. I remember thinking, okay, maybe a bear. Maybe a moose. We both kind of froze and listened. But pretty quickly, we both realized something was wrong. It wasn't just branches breaking. It sounded like something plowing through the forest, like a bulldozer made of teeth and muscle. The island wasn't very big, and we were camped near the center. We could hear this thing, whatever it was, coming from one end of the island, toward us. And then came the sound I can still hear in my bones. This scream, this primal, ripping sound, like an animal and a human and something else all balled into one. It started to our right, way down at one end of the island, and within seconds, the sound was suddenly all the way over on our left. Not just the scream moving, but the crash of it barreling through thick timber, as if it had crossed the entire island in maybe 10 seconds, maybe less. Now, that might not sound impossible until you picture the terrain. This wasn't smooth ground. It was tangled roots, dense underbrush, fallen trees. You'd be hard-pressed to force your way 10 feet through that stuff in 10 seconds. But whatever this was, it sounded like it was tearing from one end of the island to the other. Full speed, screaming. I remember turning to look at Mark. The firelight was flickering across his face, and he was pale. Not worried about the weather pale. This was someone who'd spent years leading people through the wildest parts of that park. I had never seen fear on him before, but in that moment, he looked genuinely terrified. He locked eyes with me and said, very quietly at first, "We need to get off this island." Then, a half second later, louder, with this edge I'd never heard from him, "We have to get off this island. Right now." We moved. I don't think I've ever packed so quickly in my life. We didn't bother with proper gear organization. We just grabbed what we could, shoved it into the canoe, and dragged it down to the water. The whole time, that thing, whatever it was, kept crashing and shrieking, here, then there, like it was circling the island or bouncing from one side to the other way faster than any normal animal could move. We pushed off and paddled hard, straight out into the lake. We didn't go far, maybe 100 yards, maybe a bit more, but it was enough to put water between us and the island. The fire was still burning on shore, casting this orange glow over the tree line. For the next 15 minutes or so, we just drifted and listened. It felt like chaos on that little patch of land. The sounds were huge, snapping wood, violent movement, that awful screaming and growling that didn't sound like anything either of us had ever heard before. The only comparison I've ever been able to come up with is, imagine listening to a war movie, the kind set in World War II, but all compressed onto a tiny island. Explosive bursts of sound, then sudden silence, then another rush. And then, just like that, it stopped. No slow fade, no retreating footsteps. One moment, pandemonium. The next, silence. The kind of silence where your ears ring because they're trying so hard to find something to latch onto. We sat there, floating in that silence, paddles resting across our knees, too wired to talk. Eventually, Mark said, "We can't stay out here all night." And he was right. Hypothermia is just as much a threat as anything else in those conditions, even in summer. So, very reluctantly, we turned the canoe back toward the island. I remember how wrong it felt to set foot on that shore again. Everything looked normal. Our camp was just there. The fire had burned down a bit. The tent was standing. Nothing was torn up or scattered. No broken trees, no claw marks. Nothing to show for the violence we'd just heard. We walked slowly, listening, half expecting something to leap out at us. But nothing did. We stoked the fire back up, sat close to it, and talked in these low, careful voices, like we were afraid of waking something. Eventually, exhaustion won. We crawled into the tent, lay there listening for hours, and, somehow, we made it through the night without another incident. Morning came. The island looked ordinary, peaceful even. No tracks we could identify, no torn-up path through the underbrush, no sign of anything that could explain the sounds from the night before. If it had just been me, I might have convinced myself I'd misheard, that my mind had played tricks on me. But it wasn't just me. Mark heard it too. Years later, before life took us in different directions, We'd talk about that night from time to time. I moved from Canada to the States. He slipped deeper into his own struggles and eventually lost his battle with alcoholism about a decade ago. But whenever we revisited that memory, it was like no time had passed at all. We'd both go quiet for a moment, and then one of us would say, "Do you remember the island?" And the fear would come back. Not as sharp as that night, but still deep. Still there. Like something lodged in the nervous system. We never found an explanation. We never turned it into a story with a neat ending or a label we were happy with. It's just this thing that happened out there in Algonquin Park, on a small island in the dark, with two friends sitting by a fire, thinking they understood the world, right up until the moment the island started to scream. So, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I guess I just want to talk it through, like I'm telling it to a friend. When I was little, maybe around 6 or 7, I had what I think was my first sleep paralysis. I'm still not even sure that's what it was, but it felt like it. In this first episode, I was in this old house made mostly of dark wood. That kind of house is really uncommon where I'm from, so it already felt strange. I was lying in a small bed in what I knew was a bedroom, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw a child. Just a kid. Very pale skin, straight black hair, just staring at me. I tried desperately to open my eyes, and sometimes I could. I'd fight and fight, finally force my eyes open, see the room, feel relief, and then it was like something pushed them closed again. And every time my eyes shut, the child was closer. No movement, no sound, just closer. Eventually I woke up for real, but that image stayed with me. Months later, I dreamt of the same house again. Same creaky wooden walls, same small bedroom. But this time there was no child. It was just me. I was in that same room, and the house caught on fire. I remember the heat, the orange glow coming through the door, the sound of crackling wood. I knew I should run, but I couldn't move. I just watched it burn. Years went by, and then the house changed. In another dream, I was in a completely different house. It was brighter, like a family had just moved in or was about to. There were boxes around, furniture half arranged. I don't remember actually seeing anyone, but I knew two things very clearly. First, that child, this time I somehow knew he was a boy, lived there. And second, this was my house. I lived there too. I knew every corner, every hallway, like I'd grown up in it. But the style of the house, I'd never seen anything like it in real life. It didn't look like any place I've ever actually been. Still, I felt completely at home. It was beautiful. Warm light, cozy rooms. I kept dreaming of that house all through my childhood. Whenever I realized I was there again, I was genuinely happy, like, oh, I'm back. It felt like coming home after a long trip. In those dreams, I'd run around, play games, laugh, play hide and seek, even though most of the time I was alone. It was awesome. There was nothing scary about it. Just this deep, strange comfort. Then, slowly, those dreams stopped. I stopped dreaming about the home house. I stopped seeing the old wooden house that burned. I stopped seeing the child. Everything just faded out. Life went on. School, friends, growing up. I didn't think about it much. And then, 2 weeks ago, now that I'm 26, and all of this started when I was maybe between 5 and 9, It came back. I dreamt of him again. This time, I was back in the old wooden house, the one that eventually caught fire in my dreams. Only now, it felt like I was there before the fire ever happened. I walked into the kitchen first. There was a woman there, his mom, I just knew it, cooking something on the stove. She was humming a song I didn't recognize. She turned around at one point, and I could see her face so clearly. But she couldn't see me. It was like I was a ghost in their house. I didn't question it. I knew exactly where to go. I walked down the hallway, turned left, and went straight into the child's room, like I'd done it 100 times. He was sitting on the floor, playing with little toy cars or maybe blocks. I can't quite remember. But he was younger than in my first sleep paralysis episode. Back then, he seemed like maybe 8 or 9. This time, he looked like a little kid, maybe 4 or 5. I stood there and watched him for a moment. Then I looked at his face. He turned his head slowly and stared straight at me. And then he screamed. It wasn't a normal scream. It was this raw, horrible sound, like he was absolutely terrified. Like something inside him was breaking. It sounded like someone screaming for their life. As he screamed, his eyes changed. His irises went completely black and huge, and around the black, there was a thin red ring. It was so vivid it still makes me feel sick to remember it. But here's the thing. Even with all of that, it didn't feel like he was some evil entity or a monster. It felt like he was a victim. Like something was happening to him, not coming from him. I woke up with my heart racing, and since that last dream, I felt uneasy at home. Nothing huge, just off. My apartment building is about 30 years old, so of course there are normal noises. Pipes, neighbors, the elevator, whatever. And those sounds don't really bother me. When I hear something I can easily explain, I'm fine. I don't get that uneasy feeling. But other times, there's this coldness. This sense that the air shifts just a little. And what really unsettles me is this feeling that there are two presences around. One just watches. Not necessarily bad, just observing. The other feels wrong. Heavy. Not like the boy, more like something that's attached to the whole situation. I know how all of this sounds. I know it might seem crazy or overdramatic. And maybe it is just my brain, my subconscious, old childhood fears resurfacing. I'm fully open to that. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm connected to this kid somehow. I don't know who he is. I've never met anyone who looks like him. I don't recognize the houses from real life. But I feel like I know him. Like I've been visiting his life in fragments over years. And honestly, I don't even know what to ask anymore. How do I reach him? Can I reach him? Why do I feel like I've known him my whole life when I've only ever seen him in dreams? Should I even try to reach out? Or is that a terrible idea? I don't have answers. I just have this story, this connection that won't go away, and this feeling that somewhere, somehow, there's a terrified little boy in a house I've never lived in, who knows me as well as I know him. So, hey, I guess I'll just talk to you like we're sitting together on the couch, because that's honestly the only way I can get through this without shutting down. I've even been to therapy to try to talk about this stuff, about the trauma from these specific events, and nobody has ever really taken me seriously. They nod, they write things down, but I can tell they think it's just anxiety or nightmares or whatever. The only people who've really believed me are my family and my partner, Jonah. We've been together 8 years now, and he's actually had weird things happen around me too, so he doesn't have the luxury of pretending it's all in my head. My first real incident happened when I was a kid. I don't remember exactly how old, but I was definitely in elementary school. I was in the basement, playing on the Wii. Well, actually, it might have been the old PlayStation by then. My memory blurs a bit. And it was early evening, not even dark outside yet. I was alone down there, except for my dog Daisy. All of a sudden, it got noticeably colder. You know that feeling where the hair on your arm stands up before your brain has even caught up? I got goosebumps, and then I felt this immediate, almost physical urge to turn my head to the left. In the doorway that led out to the garage, I saw him. A tall, shadowy man wearing a hat. The hat was almost as tall as the doorway. Honestly, maybe a little taller. And the whole figure was just wrong. Too dark, too big. Like it was taking up more space than it should. I absolutely freaked out. Daisy started growling in the exact same direction at the exact same time, which made it 10 times worse. I scooped her up and sprinted up the stairs, bawling, and told my parents what I saw. The thing is, it wasn't just me. Everyone who spent time in that basement experienced something at some point. Family, friends, even people who were just staying over once. Boxes would shift or slide when nobody was near them. Things would get flung across the room. You'd hear footsteps when you knew you were alone. A few people described seeing the same tall, shadowy man with the hat. Whatever that thing was, it followed us through my entire childhood in that house. It showed itself to me the most. I had a bedroom upstairs, but eventually I couldn't sleep there anymore. At night, I'd hear scratching inside the walls and footsteps going up and down the hallway. Walking past the staircase after dark felt like being in a horror movie. Like at any second, something might reach through the railing and grab you. My younger brother, let's call him Eli, used to sleep upstairs pretty often, but even he started avoiding it. One night, he was in bed, and a knife he kept on his desk flew off and landed in the middle of the floor. No one was near it. After that, he mostly migrated to the living room or my parents' room. There was this constant feeling, both upstairs and in the basement, that you were just unsafe. Like there was a pressure on your chest telling you, you need to leave now. A lot of weird things happened over the years, but I'll jump forward to when I was around 13 or 14. I was going through normal teenage stuff, but also some pretty heavy emotional things I kept completely to myself. One night, around 3 a.m., maybe closer to 2:30 actually, I was drifting off after watching TV. My arm was hanging off the side of the bed. I was in that half-asleep stage when your thoughts start to get fuzzy. And then I felt it. Something cold brushed the back of my hand. Not like a draft or the blanket sliding. It felt like something touched me. At that exact moment, the power in my room cut out. Just my room. Pitch black,
I went into full panic mode. I started banging on the wall, screaming for Eli, who was in the room next to mine. He came running, opened my door, and as soon as he stepped in, the lights flicked back on, like nothing had happened. We ended up sleeping in the same bed that night, because I refused to be alone. Eli used to sleep in the living room a lot, because he didn't like being upstairs alone anymore, and he didn't want to sleep with my parents past a certain age. Every once in a while, he'd wake my parents or me up in the middle of the night, terrified. He'd say he saw this goat-like, shadowy figure in the hallway, the one that connected the basement stairs, my parents' room, and the back door. Sometimes he described it more like a twisted, hunched-over animal than a man. My parents saw it too. Not often, but enough that they stopped telling him it was just his imagination. There was also another thing Eli and I both dealt with. He would come into my room some nights and wake me up, shaking my shoulder, saying something really tall had been peeking at him through the crack in his door. He said it would stand there and just stare at him for a while. And then he'd hear footsteps going down the hall toward my room, where they'd suddenly stop. He named it the Peeker, like it was almost a joke, but not really. When he said the name, his eyes never matched the casual way he'd say it. He was genuinely scared. Me and Eli both had a lot of dreams about the house too. Mine were especially violent and surreal. I'd dream about being chased through those same hallways, and in some dreams, something had already killed my entire family and our dogs, and I was the last one left. The feeling I always got in those dreams was that I was the favorite, like I was the main target, the last prey. The dreams usually ended with me being dragged away by something I couldn't see clearly, and then I'd jolt awake, heart racing. My room was always dim, even in the daytime. The closet light never worked, and one of my lamps was half broken, so a couple of bulbs were always out. There were these patches of darkness that somehow felt thicker than they should. More than once, I caught Daisy staring at my open closet, growling, exactly the way she had in the basement that first time, just locked onto something I couldn't see in that pitch-black doorway. When I was younger, I used to sleep with my parents pretty often, because I'd wake up choking or gasping, and they didn't want me alone. I remember waking up some nights and seeing what looked like two white silhouettes of children near the doorway or by the bed. I honestly didn't think too much of it at the time. I'd tell my mom like, "Oh, I saw the kids again," almost like it was normal. My aunt, let's call her Aunt Rosa, was really sensitive to this kind of thing. She told my mom that whatever was in the house wanted me specifically. She said I was the most vulnerable, the one who panicked the most, the one whose energy was always high and chaotic. She believed that made me more interesting to whatever was there. She told me, with this absolute certainty, that it was because I was depressed and cried by myself at night. That shook me, because I had never told anyone I was depressed. I was really good at hiding it, actually. Hearing her say that out loud made my blood run cold. She urged my mom to always lock the basement door at night, and to lock all the other doors too, unless we were inviting someone in intentionally. She told us to close our bedroom doors before sleeping, and to leave some lights on, because they didn't like the light.
She said she knew all this because my great-grandmother, who died before I was born, had told her. That they talked about me often, and that my great-grandmother was trying to protect me. A week before Aunt Rosa passed away, she told us that when she died, she'd watch over us. She said she'd come back as a very specific kind of butterfly to let us know she was around. Years later, after she was gone, that exact type of butterfly showed up. It wasn't even native to our area. It just appeared, and it stayed near our house for a while. And recently, one of her old music boxes, one that hadn't worked in years and wasn't even wound up, started playing softly in my parents' room. No one had touched it. No batteries. Nothing. It just started playing. The final straw that made my parents decide to move was my mom thinking someone had broken into the basement. She kept hearing noises down there, like someone was going through boxes, shuffling things around. One day, while my dad was at work, she put her phone on video, called him, and went downstairs by herself while he stayed on the line. We were all begging her not to go, but she did anyway. When she came back upstairs, she was white as a sheet. There were claw marks on the walls. Boxes that had been neatly stacked were flung everywhere, their contents spilled out all over the floor. Not long before that, she'd seen a glowing orb moving toward the basement door. She actually tried to brush it off as her eyes playing tricks on her, until she saw the basement. We moved out a few months later. During that time, while we were packing, I felt this intense, haunting energy behind me constantly, especially when I was alone in a room. It felt like something was angry I was leaving. Not just sad, angry, malevolent. Like it was hovering too close, trying to cling to me. That feeling still haunts me. Even now, I have nightmares about being back in that house. In the dreams, it feels like I never really left, or like the house itself is trying to lure me back somehow. Aunt Rosa used to tell me I had a gift like hers. She said I could sense things more clearly than other people, and that I was clairvoyant. Every year that passes, I believe her more. I've had too many experiences where I accurately sensed or knew something before it happened, especially when it comes to illness or death in people I love. These days, the activity isn't as extreme as it was in that house, but weird things still creep in. After we moved again, I had a nightmare where something was standing in my doorway, wearing my mother's face. It looked exactly like her, but it wasn't her. The expression was too cold, too empty. It just stared at me. I woke up shaken and couldn't shake that image for days. It burned into my brain. Sometimes, at night, I still hear voices calling my name. Sometimes it sounds like family members who've passed away. Other times it sounds like my parents, except I'll check and they're sound asleep. Or they'll swear they never called me. I try to ignore it now. The anxiety of knowing I can sense these things got so bad that the doctors ended up putting me on pretty strong antidepressants. So now I kind of just choose not to engage with it. As for that house, I don't really know what happened there before we moved in. I know there was at least one suicide,
and we lived right next to a cemetery, which feels a little on the nose, I guess. What I do know is that nobody seems able to stay in that house for more than a few months at a time. People move in, and then they're gone. Over and over. I'll never go back there. Even driving through that neighborhood makes my paranoia spike. My chest tightens. My palms sweat. And it feels like something old and dark wakes up. Just a little. Like it remembers me. And the scariest part? Sometimes, in the quiet, I get the feeling that it never really let go. Okay, so I'm 19 now, but this all started when I was in second grade. I used to ride the bus to and from school with my older brother. He was a couple grades ahead of me, so he always sat in the back with the big kids, and I sat more toward the middle. At the start of the year, it was like musical chairs. Random kids sitting next to me every morning until everyone figured out their permanent bus buddy. One morning, this girl I had never seen before slid into the seat beside me. And immediately, this smell just hit me. It wasn't bad, exactly. It was like this stale, old, musty smell. Like a closet that's been shut for years. Or pages in a book that's been in someone's attic forever. I still don't know how to describe it properly. It's like I only recognize it when I smell it. Anyway, I'll call her Lena. Lena was a few grades above me. I think she was in 5th. But other than that, she looked like any other kid in school. Nothing dramatic, no cape, no goth aesthetic, nothing. The only weird thing about her was that smell, because I had never smelled anything like it in my very long and worldly 7-year-old life. I honestly don't remember how we became friends. One day she just started sitting next to me, and then suddenly we were talking every morning like we'd always known each other. After about a week, on a Monday, she leaned in all serious and said, "I have a secret to tell you tomorrow. I can only tell it on Tuesdays." So obviously, I spent the whole day and night and next morning hyped out of my mind for this big secret. When Tuesday finally rolled around and we got on the bus, she turned toward me and said, "I'm a vampire." Now, even at 7, I knew what a vampire was and that they were not real. I'd seen them in cartoons and kids' shows. Like, I knew they were monsters from stories. So I just kind of stared at her like, "Girl, no." I told her I didn't believe her, and she got this offended, determined look on her face and said she'd prove it. And this part is burned into my brain. She told me the vampires can grant wishes. I had never heard that in any vampire story, so I was like, that's not a vampire thing, that's a genie thing. But she was adamant. She said if I wished to become a vampire, she would turn me into one, and then I'd see she was telling the truth. So I'm thinking, okay, this is obviously fake, so sure, why not? I agreed. I said, "I wish I was a vampire." She snapped her fingers, super dramatic, and told me to look in the big mirror at the front of the bus, the one the driver uses to see all the kids. I was sitting on the aisle side, so I leaned out into the lane to look. And I swear to you, I did not see myself in that mirror. Everyone else was there. Kids, seats, movement. But where my little head should have been, there was just nothing.
like a gap. I remember my stomach dropping. It was like all the air got sucked out of me. I started freaking out. I don't know if she'd figured out some kind of angle thing with the seats and mirror, or if she was low-key a kid magician, or something else. But I was not in that mirror. She stayed super calm and told me to wish not to be a vampire anymore. So I did. I said I wished I wasn't a vampire. She snapped her fingers again, told me to look back. And when I leaned out this time, my reflection was there, like normal. After that, I believed her, fully, no questions asked. That's when I started noticing other little things. For one, she didn't have sharp fangs or anything, but her teeth were interesting. Her canines weren't pointy, but they stuck forward a bit, kind of like Kirsten Dunst's teeth when she played Claudia in Interview with the Vampire. It gave Lena this slight lisp that was kind of cute. Then there was the bus thing. She never rode the bus home on sunny days. Ever. The only time she'd be on the bus in the afternoon was if it was cloudy, raining, or the sun was already low and hidden. At first I thought it was coincidence, but it kept happening. Day after day. Rain, she was there. Bright sun, gone. She was seriously committed to the bit. She'd also remind me, regularly, not to tell anyone she was a vampire. She'd lean in and say, in that very matter-of-fact kid way, "If you tell anyone, I'll wish you never existed." It didn't exactly scare me, weirdly. It was more like unsettling. Like, okay girl, chill. I'm not telling anybody. There was also this one side quest where she pointed at a boy in my grade, I'll call him Ethan, and told me he was a werewolf. She said it so casually, like she was just pointing out someone's shoes. I was like, sure, why not? Vampire girl, werewolf boy. Okay. About a week after the mirror incident, she told me that I could get one wish every Tuesday. Just one. I wish I could tell you what I wished for, but every time Tuesday came, my brain just blanked. I remember sitting there going, I don't know, let me think. Then on Wednesday, I'd suddenly know exactly what I wanted and tell her, and she'd be like, it's Wednesday, too late. So I basically wasted my weekly vampire wish subscription. Even so, I never got bad vibes from her. It felt like I was the only person who really knew her. No one else talked to her on the bus, and since we were in different grades, I never saw her once we stepped off. She just sort of disappeared into the school somewhere. For a long time after all of this, I just assumed she was a kid who had watched some vampire movie and fully committed to roleplay. But then I remembered how things ended. The last time I ever saw her was a Tuesday morning. I got on the bus expecting the usual, you get one wish routine. But instead, she told me there was going to be a monster party that night. She said she wanted me to sneak out of my house and come. I was curious, but I also knew there was zero chance of 7-year-old me successfully sneaking out anywhere. So I just said, okay, sure. The way kids do when they have no intention of following through. I asked where the party was going to be, and she told me the location would come to me in a dream. That's how vampires kept secrets, she said. As soon as I got off the bus that day, I basically forgot about the whole thing. I went home, had my normal kid afternoon, and went to bed like always. And that night, I had one of the most vivid dreams of my entire life. In the dream, I was at this party full of monsters. Not the super scary, modern horror versions. They look like old black and white movie monsters. Classic vampire, classic mummy, classic Frankenstein type. They were all just walking around, drinking from red cups like they were at a regular high school house party or something. It felt weirdly casual. I walked through the room
and eventually saw a vampire who looked exactly like the stereotypical Dracula. Pale skin, widow's peak, long cloak, dramatic fangs, the whole deal. Behind him, there was this huge opening in the floor that looked like the edge of a cliff inside the building. It didn't make sense, but dreams don't care about architecture. I walked up to him, and he smiled and said something like, "Oh, you made it." It wasn't creepy or threatening. It felt almost friendly, like he'd been expecting me. We started talking, and as we talked, he shifted a little, and I moved with him so I could hear him better. Without really noticing it, I ended up standing with that cliff edge right beside me. At some point, I slipped. In the dream, I grabbed the edge with both hands and was hanging there, begging him to help me up. The whole thing was strangely calm. I wasn't screaming. He wasn't panicking. It was like we were both moving underwater. He just stood there for a moment, watching. Then he slowly bent down and one by one lifted my fingers off the edge. I let go. I fell. My dreams aren't usually in first person. They play like a movie. So when I fell, it was like a camera panned down with me. I watched myself fall and hit the ground. The dream didn't end there either. It stayed. I saw my own little body lying there, still and clearly dead. Then I woke up. It was so bizarre, because nothing about my time with Lena up to that point had felt sinister. Weird? Yes. Creepy sometimes? Also yes. But not evil. The only thing that really stands out as dark in hindsight was her last conversation with me about the party, and her wishing me out of existence, threats. After that night, I never saw her again. No goodbye, no explanation. She just stopped existing in my world. I didn't connect her to the dream right away either. It took me a couple of years to look back and realize the night of the monster party was the night I had that dream, and that smell, that weird, stale, old smell, has stayed with me. I've only met maybe 4 people in my life since then who smelled even slightly like her. Every time it happens, it's like I'm back on that bus seat in 2nd grade, leaning into the aisle and not seeing myself in that mirror. I don't know if she was just a really imaginative kid with a talent for illusions, or something else I'll never understand. But that girl, that smell, and that dream, they've never left me.